And then if you could switch me back over to host, and I think we are on YouTube now.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and call us to order. Thank you, Council Members Appel and Jackson and all staff for being with us here. Ask you to join me in a moment of reflection as we acknowledge our thankfulness for the men and women who serve our country, our veterans, as we honor them tomorrow on Veterans Day. Amen. We're thankful for all their sacrifice. All right, so we've got, I think, some good news to start off with. You'll see in just a moment our collections and our projections for accommodations and hospitality taxes and fees are kind of getting right back on track. So I'm going to turn this right on over to Amy, and she'll bring us up to date. Amy?
Good afternoon. We'll go over the tourism budgets first, just to kind of give 2021 projections that we have so far. We're looking pretty good considering our budget was only 17.5 and we're projecting out 30.7. So we're definitely coming back for tourism dollars anyway. And just looking at where we are, kind of give you that picture whenever we meet. We're still lagging a little bit behind with A-tax, but hospitality is coming back pretty much to where we were before. So we would expect probably A-tax will continue to get better over time as well.
And so I'll remark to that, that we get a hospitality report, a hotel occupancy report every week. And we are back on the peninsula and almost West Ashley to pre-COVID occupancy rates. But what's really fascinating is that the average daily rate that they charge for the room, particularly on the peninsula, is about 20% higher than it was before COVID. And our taxes are a direct percentage, right, of the dollars collected. So even though the number of nights sold is just marginally ahead of 2 years ago, the dollars are, at this point, not counting the early months of the year where we were off, but if you compare month to month from 2 years ago, we're doing better than we were 2 years ago on accommodations.
So moving on to state accommodations tax, what's included in the budget is the things that were required by state law to do: contribution to the CBB, transfer to the general fund. We have existing agreements and debt service that we usually pay with state accommodations tax, including our Office of Cultural Affairs, the festivals that we have, Spoleto, Moja, the Christmas and New Year's celebrations, all of those things that we used to have them fill out applications for that we thought was kind of silly. We should just, allocate those funds to them. So they were doing that. The Dash, that shuttle is free. We used to have an agreement between us, the Ports Authority, and the CBB. CBB is no longer making that contribution. So you'll see that cost has gone up for the city in this budget as well. And then based on our projections that we have, we could do fund some grant applications if we choose to do so. So that budget looks like the SM 21 approved are projected, and then the 2022 proposed budget. And you'll see just those debt payments and all the agreements that we usually do. Our City of Charleston Cultural Festivals Fund, and then the Dash. Those are all things that we typically fund out of this pot of money. And you'll see 21 and 22, we're projecting $1.9 million that we could grant to nonprofits if we choose to do so. And we could start that application process soon if we wanted to do so. we have to spend these funds within 2 years. So I think it would be a good idea for us to go ahead and get that grant application started. Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Amy. So I know it's one line of text, but when you have the Gibbs and the aquarium, do we do something automatic for the Charleston Museum too?
So this is the bond that we have. That's the debt service on the bond that we had for the renovations to both of those. I think it was HVAC for the aquarium, and I think it was some part of the renovation to the Gibbs that we contributed to. We had a revenue bond for them to utilize, and that's the debt service.
Okay, so which line item then do we use to support the museums that, are actually city?
So Charleston Museum would typically apply for accommodations tax funds, Councilmember Jackson, which we would, usually award them some funding for that. But you'll see in the hospitality fee fund as well that we do fund a little bit to the museum in that fund as well.
Okay, so all the museums outside of the little bit that's in hospitality, which now I'm leafing through that, and then the bond transfer to debt service. So they all compete then for what would be at the bottom of the
That's right.
screen here, 19.19.
Mm-hmm.
And
For
Amy,
both years. So it's, yes, I'm sorry, Jennifer.
that's this might be on my end, but it looks like part of your screen is obscured.
Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry about that. So it's 1.9 for each year, Councilmember Jackson, too, for 2021 and 2022. You're muted.
Instead of both.
Mhm.
The way I read both is like that's combined. So you're saying each of those 2 years is going to have 1.9.
So we're projecting a $1.9 million additional funding from what was budgeted in 2021 that we could grant out. And then same with 2022.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Amy, when would we started an application process already, didn't we, for community assistance? Are you saying we will have to start up another sort of round of applications for the A-tax money?
That's right. They'd be specific to accommodations tax. So it would be different. And it was ARPA grant funds that we have the application process out for now.
Gotcha.
Amy,
Yes.
of the 1.9 million, how much can we use towards Charleston Police Department salary?
None.
So we can't
have that for, if you keep looking through the other tourism budgets, then that's where you will see that in hospitality, and then a little bit of municipal accommodations that we use to for tourism related, like the Team 9 that's in King Street District, comes from hospitality.
Right. So is there any more that we can use to
No.
supplement that?
We've calculated out everything, every part that we can use to transfer into the general fund. And that is, you'll see that in the other two budgets.
All right. So those monies are already been accounted for.
Yes.
Is there any way of using any of this 1.9 towards any other kind of salaries?
Well, state aid tax is a lot more restrictive, Councilmember Shade, than the other two funds.
Right.
So I would say no, or not for state aid tax.
Okay. All right.
And like I said, we've calculated every part of the general fund that picks up anything tourist related costs. We pick that up in municipal accommodations and hospitality fee to transfer it back into the general fund. So we've already done those calculations.
I know, and I'm glad you reminded me. I know that both of those funds have restrictions on them, but $2 million is a lot of money.
That's about what we usually give out in grant funds, though, for accommodations tax. That's typically right, even a little bit over $2 million is usually what we do grant to agencies. Because that's what the state accommodations tax, they want us to do that.
Right, but 2 million, an additional $2 million is just a lot of money to be using for besides things of art grants in aid. I mean, it's, when we look at a tight budget here, that could solve a lot of issues if we could somehow, I hate to use the word manipulate, but I guess that's the only way I can think of it, manipulate this money to other revenue shortfalls. But I mean, I think you've already answered my question, and I kind of knew the answer before I asked it. We're restricted as to where this money can be used and how it can be used.
That's right. And they encourage us to grant those funds out because it helps those organizations put more heads and beds in our city. So the state, that's kind of what that fund is for as well. So we would typically give $2 million to nonprofits for that purpose to help encourage more tourists to our city.
So let me ask it this way, Amy. How much of the ARPA money did we designate for arts-related organizations? And so my follow-up already would be, could we put that ARPA money back, so to speak, in the ARPA pot where it's a little more flexible and use this 1.9 for that allocation? Does that make sense?
It does. So we have allocated $800,000 of ARPA funding for grants. And a lot of the nonprofits that would typically apply for tax money have applied for ARPA funding. So we could almost take those out of the pot of ARPA and not award them with that $800,000 that we've allocated and give them tax money instead. And then that would free up some additional, more money for other organizations that aren't tourist related.
Well, since we were using so much ARPA, as we'll cover later in the meeting today, I think that might be a good thing to do, recapture some of that money. And, I hear you that this is the normal amount, but here we are in mid-November already, and we've got a similar amount for 21 and 22. So it's going to seem like a healthy slug of money by the time we get this money out next year, don't you think?
Mm-hmm. They will.
Yeah. Councilmember Jackson?
Yeah, I was just hoping that we could get like a short list or the most logical or the most frequently granted to organizations, so that we're all familiar with that by the time you make the recommendations on who should get what. It's sort of a closed list, right? They're not
No,
eligible.
Anybody can apply for it. So we would actually get the application process out and let people apply for the funds, and it would go through the same process that it does every year. So you have a committee that will look at the applications and they will allocate the funds out. Then it comes to the mayor for his review and approval, and then it comes to council, and it goes through the tax committee as well, that external committee as well.
I just think it would answer some of the, what we don't remember, because you all keep track of this so carefully. Just
So
maybe
we can send
maybe
you
the
a list of the frequent flyers.
like
for
the
lack of a better-
2019 list, or
Okay,
that'd be great. Thanks.
sure. We can really just send you the last, few budgets, Councilmember Jackson, which you'll see the same organizations that apply.
Yeah, that's what I'm expecting. So thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else on tax or state tax?
No, that's good news. Thank you.
Okay. And then municipal accommodations, it's 2% per overnight lodging, 2 separate ordinances. 1% must be used for capital improvements for tourism related projects, and then 1% is for property tax relief. So Councilmember Shade, this is where that comes into transferring into the general fund for some of our operational expenses that we were just talking about. And so this would be the draft budget for 2022. The first column is the 50% for capital improvements. The other is for property tax relief.
Hey, Amy, go back. You were too fast.
The tourism-related police and other general fund salaries, Councilmember Shane, and then entertainment district officers, and then also some tourism parking enforcement salaries. And then the only capital project we have in there is for Market Street Streetscape, and then the Energy Performance Fund for the 2023 Johnson Controls debt service. Any questions on that?
Looks good.
Amy,
Councilmember Waring.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. The entertainment officers, is that number accurate? It was 8 and 15 and 20 and 16. What's that number now, since we had to give, extra enforcement down there? I mean, do we know how many officers?
Is anybody talking? Because I can't hear anything. I don't know if I just lost my speakers or not.
Mr. Mayor, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Again,
We
yeah,
can hear you. Amy, you need to work on it.
I don't know that number, Councilmember, but we can check with the police department.
Yeah, I'm just thinking it may be more than 20. That's what I mean.
Yeah, but I mean, I think we're allowed a certain percentage of the revenue. So we're getting every penny we can, aren't we, Amy, for salaries out
All
of?
of a sudden, I can't hear.
Larry asked a question about the police number.
I can't
You
hear.
want to comment on that? Presentation.
Matt, if you can hear me, maybe I think she lost her audio on her end, so maybe if she could call in by phone as well.
Yeah, we're working on trying to figure it out right now.
I can hear now. I have no idea what just happened. My computer, I'm getting a new computer next week because it's glitching on me very, very much so. So I'm sorry, Councilmember Murray.
CFO needs a new computer. That's
Oh, goodness.
for
gracious.
sure.
Yeah, what I was thinking was, do we have more than 20 officers in the entertainment district now, since we had to beef up, enforcement down there? Yeah, I remember in 15 when all of this, Mr. Mayor, was coming out of general funds, and we needed to increase taxes. And I'll never forget, Bill Moody was the one that brought up the issue. We have this entertainment district. Why shouldn't tourism dollars pay some of that? And that's where those 8 officers came from. Because now it's 20. I'm just wondering, is it more than, do we have 25 down there now?
There's actually 23, Councilmember Ware. I'm sorry, that note is old. We should have taken it out of there. So there's 23 officers. We'll make sure that we change that.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to go to hospitality, if that's okay. So the draft budget includes a transfer into the general fund of around $4.8 million, almost 4.9 for tourist-related operational expenses. Also a transfer to the parking fund for tourism-related operational expenses for $300,000. And then it includes all of those contractual management agreement items that are typically paid from this fund as well. So there are 2 outstanding issues with hospitality. You'll see them highlighted when I show you the budget, or if you looked at it last night. One is for debt service for the Battery Seawall project. We had talked about doing a revenue bond to finish up that project. So we have the number in there for debt service, but we had, I know that there's been a request from the state to contribute to that funding, but we're going to go ahead and just leave the debt service payment in there because it's so uncertain whether we'll receive that funding from the state or not. So that number will stay. I just wanted to point that out to everyone. And then the second item is a Joseph Riley ballpark upgrades. The MLB has issued a mandate that certain upgrades are made to the stadium, and we'll need to do some renovations in order to accommodate that mandate. Majority of it is for to improve the quality of life for players and umpires, etc. It's kind of modernizing some of the aspects of the locker rooms and things like that, ensuring the security of the facility, sufficient locker space, storage space, separating female facilities out as well for umpires and other, whatever baseball. I'm not good with baseball, so I can't really answer all those questions. And then weight room facilities and things like that. So we're currently working with them on a cost share plan for this. Estimated cost is $3.25 million. You can split it over 2 years, so that would happen in 22 and 23. We do have unrestricted fund balance that we can utilize, but we cannot use 100% of hospitality funds to do the renovations. So general fund would have to pick up some of it. So we're still working on that. We're going to leave the $600,000 that we normally would leave for the maintenance of the ballpark in there, and bring later, once we get this worked out with the River Dogs, a use of fund balance that would come to you later on, just to let you know that.
Hey, Amy, can you go back to the previous slide?
Yes. And this is a project that's ongoing right now that Matt Fountain's in charge of, Councilmember Shade. It's just the low battery.
Right. So what numbers are we talking about here, Amy?
So I'll show you the budget. Ready? See that $2.7 million that's highlighted? That's the debt service for that revenue bond that we're anticipating getting in early 2022.
Okay.
Okay. We're projecting $18.3 million revenues. And then, you know, we have the entertainment district police. We're buying some more cameras for the police department, which will be mostly in the entertainment district, even the market and things like that. So we're utilizing hospitality funds for that, sidewalks. And then we have all of those agreements that we usually pay, the Family Circle Cup, the International African American Museum, our Gilliard management agreements, Charleston Museum, the Gibbs Museum, Volvo Tennis Center, and then the promotional and advertising for CBB for certain things that they have, like Fashion Week and the ESPN Classic and Second Sunday and those types of things. Yes.
Yeah, I see two sort of operating numbers for the Gilliard. Why are they separate? The Gilliard Management Corp operating contribution is 1.5, and then the Gilliard Center operating costs.
So the operating cost would be for the performing arts, the utilities and things like that for the building itself. And then the operating, that's the contribution, Councilmember Jackson, is our operating agreement with them, the management agreement, basically.
So we don't get to weigh in on how they spend that money then, right? That's. But the operating costs, do we get a budget from them for that?
Well, that we pay for those directly. So we get the bills for those.
So do those utilities include our office space too then?
Not in hospitality, we pay for those with general fund.
So Amy, relative to Councilmember Waring's question of a couple of minutes ago, where it says entertainment district police, could we increase that 174,551 to cover some of the additional personnel and overtime that I know the police are spending on the CBD?
If we knew, I mean, we have the number of officers that, I mean, their salaries and everything else calculated into that. So we'd have to look at it to see if there's really any additional that we could squeeze out of that.
Well, I think we should ask because, you know, since we've been doing that late night lane closure, and I'm confident that they're spending more money than that. They just hadn't told you probably.
We'll see. We can talk to them about it.
Yeah.
So included in the capital projects fund for that is 25 Folly Park, some money set aside for the additional cost for the bike ped bridge, the Gilliard reinterment fountain, and a restroom at White Point Garden. just for your reference. Any questions on those?
Yeah.
Yes.
Councilmember Waring.
Have we determined, how's that White Point Garden? I mean, where is the restroom going to be located in White Point Garden?
I'm not, do you know, Mayor? I don't know if Jason's figured that out exactly yet.
The plan, the location that Jason came up with is on the King Street side across from the parking lot, almost the northern end of the Fort Sumter building, the old hotel building.
Right.
But kind of near that gravel, big wide walkway that comes through the center of the park, you know,
Right.
and
I know
ends
what
on
it is. Right,
King
right.
Street. And it would be just to the north of that walkway, I think.
Well, how many years it's going to take to get that through the BAR?
I don't know. Good question. But,
I'm just kidding.
the first step is for us to allocate a little money for it, for the
Yeah.
project. So this is the first time we've ever done that.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Councilmember Jackson.
Yeah, just on a timing thing, I appreciate that we're gonna spend money on 25 Folly Park and the crossing, Ashley River crossing, but is this the year? I mean, that's like down the road, right? When aren't they behind on the whole construction thing?
On the bridge,
Yeah, on the bridge and the park, we wouldn't need a fancy park there or, a cleaned up park until people are actually using the bridge. I'm just wondering about the timing.
well, the federal, we are on time, by the way, with our grant requirements. They did extend it, just not at our request, but just because with COVID, they were running behind. So we're in time, but the way they work is when we put out the RFP next year, if there's a projection that if the estimate is that we're over what was originally budgeted, we have to be able to show that we're ready, willing, and able to pay the differential. And so Amy's being very conservative and kind of planning ahead with some initial estimates we've gotten to make sure we can check that box.
And then we could recapture if we don't have the overage, right?
We got, well, I'll be honest with you, the thing that I would like to also fund is the first phase of the Ashley River Walk that goes from Brittlebank Park under the
Right.
bridges and connects to the bridge. That's estimated to be about another $2 million. And we don't have that funding identified yet. So if we end up over on the allotment to the bike ped bridge, we could put it towards the Ashley River Walk, which would tie together very nicely.
Okay, good. I like that. I said on that procurement committee, it's going to be a great walk
Yep.
along the marina.
Councilmember Waring?
Yeah, listen, I agree with you on all of that, on both accounts, Mr. Mayor. The TIF at, not Brittlebank Park, but, West Edge. Can't some of the money come out of that to help pay for the Ashley River Walk?
No, because it's tied up in a development agreement, Councilmember Waring, so with West Edge.
Is that right?
Mhm.
All of it?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean,
Yes.
so just like the other TIFs that we have with development agreements, they're specifically for those development agreements. And then over time, hopefully you can use some of it, but it's tied up in the development agreement with West Edge.
So you don't think none of the West Edge people will use that bike pedestrian path?
Well, they may, but they have a lot of other projects already on their, in the queue that they need the money to finish so that TIF is successful. So, I
Well, let
mean,
me ask
eventually
you,
down the line, perhaps, but
with some of the recent sales that's taken place on the apartment building and on the number 10 and number 22 West Edge, is there revenue opportunities there?
Well, it all goes to the infrastructure though, and the development agreement so that they can keep building the plan for West Edge.
The whole new drainage system.
And there's parking and there's all kinds of, there's a lot of infrastructure they still have yet to do over there.
Well, I'm going to interject that the jury's not out on this, Councilmember Waring, and I think over the next year or two, if we see a significant increase in funds from that district, that we should talk with our partners over there about that development agreement, and maybe there's a modification that could be made to it.
I agree with you on that. I think there should be some monies coming out of that. I'm
Yeah.
trying to help you out here and get some of that 2 million out of that.
But let's see what the assessment does after those 2 sales come through.
All right. What are some monies that we loaned to that agreement going back to the period of time when they had to do the streetways that was on pylons? Didn't we do something, Amy, back with a loan? Did they ever pay us our money back?
They did.
Okay, well, that's out. Okay, I'm off that horse.
Okay, moving on, stormwater, Matt is out. So this is basically the same budget that he went through in great detail a few weeks ago or a month ago, or however long time flies by very quickly. So the total budget is about 14.1 million. And the main items were, the main things he talked to you about were the positions that he wanted: the Concord Street Pump Station, preventive maintenance and small repairs, and the Courtney Street Pump Station, preventive maintenance and small repairs. Increasing emergency repairs, pipe cleaning contracts increase, and the ECOM program management contract. So it's exactly as he presented it to you prior.
So what about other projects? Maybe I need to circle back with Matt on that. We had some of the projects like, for example, the doo-wop district. We've been talking about that now about coming up on 5 years. And the timing he had on that was something like 2023. It touches on at least 4 districts, council districts.
Right. So Councilman Waring, that would be the drainage fund, and we're planning to put something together for all of you to kind of go through all those projects at a later date, to go through all the projects that we have and whatever allocation, what's allocated to projects and what we can allocate more to in the future. So when we get through the budget process, we plan to come back and do a presentation to you on the drainage fund.
All right.
If that's okay with you.
That's fine. That's fine. Thank you.
So moving on, so general fund and enterprise fund budget remains basically the same as we discussed last week. Local option sales tax failed last night, so there's really no revenue option there for that. So right now, it's, like I said, it's the same as we talked about last week. Only includes requests that can be funded by ARPA funds, general fund reserves, or hospitality funds. It does not include the restoration of overtime at all for any of the departments, and includes the graduated pay plan, but modified to increase pay to $14 an hour in 6-month increments. So we'll do $13.50 January 1st, and then $14 on July 1st. And that reduced the cost of the pay plan by 1.9 million. So this is what the revenue side looks like. Well, actually, what the general fund budget looks like at an $8.4 million deficit, like we talked about last week. Councilman Jackson, do you have a question? I'm sorry.
I back on the expense. I forgot to ask you last time, I guess, about the paid family life. Are we going to be able to put in the 28,000 that was the minimum recommendation from the Human Resources Committee, as we were able to fund the performance pay plan?
We did not include that because my understanding was we were holding off again based on the fact that we don't have funding for it this year, and that our main priority would be the pay plan. So it's not included in here, Councilmember Jackson.
Amy?
Okay, well, I would like to put that back on the list of something that we consider seriously. I know that there's, not that we can't historically say that that's going to be something that will help our recruiting and our retention. But in other communities, it's proven out to be that case. And it's $28,000 to begin a program that we all pledged our support for before COVID, but we agreed to keep it on the, off the budget the last 2 years, and it's $28,000. I really do think that it's time to start it.
I understand that, Councilmember Jackson, but I think that number was kind of projected low because it was based on actual annual leave that people have. So they're very conservative with what they use. So if it were offered to them, they'll take more leave. So I think that number was a little bit low to begin with. And we were also discussing the fact that we have such an attrition rate right now that having another leave program would be detrimental to our departments right now, with the fact that they don't have people as it is right now. That's what I thought we discussed, but we can talk about it further.
I think a number I saw more recently was 44,000 rather than 28. Don't get me wrong.
Well, it was two different packages, Mayor. The 44,000 represented trying to do 4 weeks paid leave from maternity. I don't have it in front of me, but
right.
or 2 weeks for everything, and that was the 28,000 number.
I see. Excuse me.
Amy?
Yes.
Under the item of permits and fees, and I just don't remember if we did this or not, but didn't we pass an ordinance to increase some permits and fees, particularly for folks on using metered spaces on streets?
We did, and that's included in that number, Councilmember Shade.
Did that have any kind of significant impact at all?
I think it was around $300,000 if I remember right, but I could be wrong.
Okay, well, that's a good ballpark
Mhm.
number on that. So, and that would include just half of a fiscal year, wouldn't it?
No, that would be full year.
That didn't include a full fiscal year. Okay,
Yes,
thank you, ma'am.
you're welcome. Any other questions on this? Okay, so enterprise funds, projecting a 6.1 million surplus from that, from those funds, which would lead us to our $2.2 million deficit overall. I think we discussed last week. And again, I just want to reiterate, it does not include restoration of 2021 cuts or the restoration of overtime for all the departments. And if we were to wanting to restore overtime for the departments, it'd be $1.7 million.
So I'm just going to say she's got the note here that explains it, but honestly, that figure on the page here of 2.2 million is really an understatement of what we should be funding for our city to conduct business for next year. We've shown we need some of that overtime. Other things were cut in 21 that many of the departments really need. And this doesn't include a number of requests that, I think we should be including, like one example was an annexation coordinator we wanted to add to the planning department. And I believe over time that person would bring money in. And I'm not sure about the enterprise manager for the recreation department we discussed as somebody who also is supposed to be hired to be thinking about how we can increase fees. And so anyway, my general point is I think that the real deficit that we need to try to cover is more like 5 or 6 million rather than 2.2, to be honest with you.
So I just have what it includes. And so we had some cuts from 2021 that could be ARPA funded that we had previously amended the budget to include. Decided that we could use ARPA funds, the first tranche, to fund those items. That comes to $267,700.
And I see that that includes the 80,000 set aside for racial equity and training.
That's correct.
I mean, we were just talking about the utilization of those funds in a meeting today. I would not like to see that go.
No, this is in the budget, Councilmember. Correct.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Everything that I'm showing you now is included in our 2022 budget.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm reading it wrong. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
And that includes another 70, Councilmember, for the racial bias audit implementation as well.
Okay, I was reading it wrong. Thank you.
These are, but to be honest with you, all these things we're talking about funding with ARPA is all one-time money, you know, and that's a little scary prospect as well, as you know. This is one-time money.
Yes.
And Amy, remind us, I know that we didn't allocate all of the ARPA funds to the penny. We had like 400,000 as a wait and see what we need, right? Sort of.
You know what, I meant to look at
Unspent
that.
money.
Yeah, I meant to look at that and have that number based on what we've allocated out from the first tranche and also what we're using to balance the 2022 budget. And I didn't do that, Councilmember Jackson, but I'll get that to you later if that's okay.
Great. Yes, thank you.
I'll do it. I meant to have that in here. I apologize.
Councilmember
Amy, yeah, on this thing, what the mayor pointed out about a one time, this is an annual disbursement or covering. But some of these things are annual expenditures. Like this is a small potato, $3,000, but chairs be refurbished. That's a one-time expense, and $30,000 for removing boats. That need how many boats are out there we need to remove. And so it's. I hear what the mayor is saying about that, but some of this is maybe just a one-time expense kind of a deal that we need to be worried about, or not to be worried about, frankly. It's not a big ticket item. We're talking about $267,000 for all of these. But Mayor, I hear what you're saying about that, but some of those just may come and go, and we may not need to spend all this money for continuing expenses.
Well, there's more to come. I mean, if you look at everything that ARPA, we're trying to find funding just to cover our any expense we can. And I think the total is over 4 million, isn't it, Amy?
Yes. Yeah.
And this is money out of the second tranche that we don't have yet that we'll be getting in May.
This is the first tranche, actually. This slide, Mayor, is the first tranche.
This slide is the first tranche.
That's
I'm
right.
sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
But there's the second tranche to come.
Right.
Here we go. She's got the next slide.
Yeah.
There you go.
So mandatory life safety items, these are all the things that we're using ARPA funds. So the fire department's SCBA replacement, we're using the grant match that we're required to have, we're allowed to use ARPA funds for, so we're using that. And that's a very large item, and that's something they desperately need. So not anything that we could cut out, but we were fortunate enough to be able to utilize this funding to get it done. I won't go through each and every single one of these, but if you have any questions, let me know if you want to read through them, or I can keep going.
Just to be clear, this is the second tranche then.
Yes.
Right.
You want me to move forward?
I think so.
I meant to make that bigger. I'm sorry. So this is also the high priority request. These are things that we felt were high priority that we should fund, and also, again, all one-time things, but important things at the same time. A lot of IT things to allow us to keep moving with our EDMS electronic document management system to keep that project moving forward. And some studies that were important to planning as well, the zoning and the downtown plan, garbage cart audit, and then just some other, those are, I think, the main things that were.
So Amy, we still excluded changing Cumming Street to two-way, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Amy,
Mhm.
you or the mayor both maybe touch on the 500,000 for the water plan, mayor's office.
Mhm.
What's that? How you break that down? What's that pay for?
I'll let the mayor answer that question. I'm not exactly sure what that all will entail.
Thought it was $1 million. Oh, 500 for
No.
zoning. Okay.
Yeah,
No, that-
it's $1 million for the zoning. It's 5, we'll do that over.
It's the
2 years.
companion to the protection. Perimeter
that-
protection.
That's the recommendation from our 3x3 committee that we received from them about a month ago. I guess it's a more citywide, comprehensive plan regarding drainage, not just this perimeter protection, but all types of water hazards or risks that we have. And, you know, we've talked about this ever since we had the Dutch dialogues that
Right.
it would be wise to have a more comprehensive, holistic, citywide plan, water plan.
No, I understand what it's for, but I mean, how's it gonna be spent?
How's it going to be spent?
Right. We hiring somebody to write the plan, or what is it? How's it
I
appropriate?
gotta defer to Dale Morris and Matt Fountain on that.
It's in professional and contractual services, Councilmember Waring, so it would be hiring somebody to do it.
And Mayor, that was one of the major things that when we were in Amsterdam, they were strongly encouraging us to do almost first, if I'm correct.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah,
Okay.
And honestly, we've got 2/3 of the picture already done and all these other plans and studies that we've done, to be honest with you. I mean, it's not like you couldn't say we hadn't been working on it, but it's a cumulative thing. There's certain parts of the city we hadn't really drilled down on, and then you put it all together in a nice big bow at the end, and you got a citywide water plan.
so since we have the half of the Wagner and Ball team already under our employment, maybe we can save some money on that one.
Oh,
Maybe so.
Mayor, because it sounds from what you said, it sounds like just consolidating existing plans is what's needed for an overall water plan for the city.
That's part of it, council member. Like I said, I'll give you an example. Like the doo-wop area, it's already been studied. We know where every drop is going, and we know projects that we need to work on. So that would be part of a citywide water plan, but we haven't done maybe 3 neighborhoods next to it. You follow me? So their whole.
The Wamba plan would be the same, but it's a part of it. The Wamba, the
Central Park.
Yeah,
Basin.
yeah,
Okay.
that's another piece of it. Absolutely.
There's
That's the one
30
I'm-
watersheds on James Island.
But Mayor, and I'm not being flippant about it. I mean, we've had a water plan since 1984. We know, just based upon the 1984 study, where all of our problems are in terms of flooding, stormwater, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, are we gonna do something similar to the 1984 plan? We're gonna replicate it? We're gonna
No.
I mean, because to me, when we talk about an overall water plan, okay, to me, that's what it should look like. Because that 1984 plan told us every single place where there was a problem, and what we should do in order to fix it. That's a water plan to me. While in 1984, the city has expanded considerably, but I think the crux of a water plan for the city of Charleston has been done since 1984. The question has always been cost and implementation.
Well, I would respectfully say that, we've grown, some things have changed, the sea level has risen, our, Dutch dialogue's attitude is a little different now. So I would say we ought to have this discussion with Matt and Dale in the room, and they can probably elucidate this a little better than I can, but it was a request of the 3x3 committee, and we can talk about it more before we approve this budget, but I really would like to get Dale and Matt talking with us on it.
The 3x3 did consider the 1984 piece, I'm sure.
I don't know that. I wasn't at all their meetings. Councilmember.
Okay,
Mayor.
all right. I just think that's such an important piece of it.
I could speak to that. The 1984 piece hadn't been a main focal point of the discussions. So anyway.
Right,
None
because
of the 3x3 committee.
right, because they weren't talking about an overall water plan.
Primarily talking about the wall. Primarily.
Right.
Amy, is there any way to make this slide a little bit bigger? I'm trying to read it and it's just.
I would have to get out of it and then come back in. You want me to do that? Or I'm going to send it to you later. Is that better?
Yeah, I'm trying to read it and keep up with everything, and it's just I'm getting
I'll send you the Excel spreadsheet that has all of it on there. That'll be easier to read. How about that?
That would be much better. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
So Peter, you just need to use your bifocal.
I got these right here. I mean, it's just.
Mayor, excuse me, when do you expect to vote on the second tranche list like that? Is that going to be part of the budget vote or for 2022?
Anything that we are including in this budget that includes ARPA funds would be approving those funds
Okay.
and through the budget process. So then the next are high priority requests with other funding. And so these are either hospitality or general fund reserves. The first one is hospitality funds. And then the other is general fund reserves, because we have our financial policy that says we'll put $1 million away for building maintenance. And so that is what's covering those costs right there for the renovations to those buildings. And then there was other, we had told Gianna, she had covered a couple of positions with grants because they were mid-year positions that we did not have funding for. So she covered those with grant dollars. So we told her in 22 we would switch those to the general fund. So we have done that with 2 of the positions. And then we're adding an additional community liaison person to her budget for 2022. And then the Hope Center director and social worker as well for 2022. And then Mayor, the enterprise manager for recreation is also included. And then the traffic safety inspector is included in this budget as well. So those were the only positions that were included in the budget for 2022.
Amy, where are those safety security camera replacements for?
We have a list, Councilmember Shade, I could tell you, but they're all in our entertainment districts, like up King Street, Market Street, I think maybe some East Bay areas are all in our highly trafficked areas, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks.
I just can't tell you specifically.
That's okay. No, I was more curious as to whether or not they were for buildings like at the city hall.
Okay, they're all King Street and some of them are in parks as well. So,
Okay.
Okay.
Good enough.
Okay. Any questions on these items?
And you said these are, some is from the general fund and some is from the ARPA fund?
No, so the, all of this would be general fund. The
Okay.
positions are all general fund, Councilmember Waring. And then the high priority, those other funding, the security cameras are coming from hospitality, and the parks, all the renovations you see there, the 2 fire stations, Herbert Hazel Pool, that's all general fund reserves, because we had put away $1 million for building maintenance according to our financial policy. And that's the funding we're using for those projects.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
Everybody good? So our options are to accept this as our budget with a $2.2 million deficit. Again, it's without restoring any cuts, especially overtime, which really kind of makes me nervous. Only by funding certain items with ARPA funds and other, hospitality and general fund reserves. We could use general fund reserves to balance the budget. With the uncertainty of the pandemic, I put away a little bit more than our 20% policy amount, because at that time, that's when our COVID cases were increasing. We weren't really sure what was going to happen. So I made sure that we had a little bit extra in our general fund reserves. So we could fund this deficit with general fund reserves. But then again, that only exacerbates our problems going forward, because we're using general fund reserves, one-time money for balancing our budget, and those expenses will continue into 23, and we'll just have that same problem. Yes.
I agree with everything you said. This does not contemplate a millage increase.
It does not.
So if we did do a millage increase, what would, have you estimated what type of millage increase would be needed?
I have slides going forward to my option 2.
You got, you got that coming up. Councilmember Shade?
Amy, would you give us a refresher course on how much money we depleted out of our general reserve funds for, I think, fiscal year 2020 and 2021?
So for 2021, we budgeted using $5.9 million. Because we're doing well, we probably won't have to utilize that money, but that's what we budgeted in order to balance the budget. If that does that make sense? I can't remember 2020. I have to get back to you on that.
But did we replenish any of that money that we used in 2021 or 2020 back into the reserve fund?
So when we closed out 2020, I just, I always make sure that we have our 20% there. And so we have 20% plus some. I just kept some additional funding above our 20% requirement, because I wasn't sure what was going to happen with the pandemic.
Okay.
We're good. We have our 20%. We're okay, if that's what you're asking.
Just humor me for a second, okay?
Sure.
So if we took out 5.9 million for 2021, did we replenish that 5.9 million plus an additional 20%?
We haven't replenished anything because our 2021 year isn't over yet. So we kind of need to see where we end up in 2021 to see how much, if any, of that 5.9 we'll need to utilize. So when we close out 2021, Councilmember Shea, that's when we'll make sure that all of that is trued up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so there's, I guess, a distinction between the money that we took out, replenishing that money, plus adding another 20% on top of that. If we took out $5 million, the question is, did we replace that $5 million and then add back into the fund our additional 20% per policy?
So our 20% is based on the next year's budget. Okay, so when I do the 20% at the end of, when we were closing out 2020, I looked at our 2021 budget and made sure I had 20% of the expenditures.
Hey, Nigel, how are you?
Okay.
Can I call you back? I'm in the middle of a budget.
Rick?
He muted.
Yeah.
So that's how it works. So now 2021 isn't over yet, Councilmember Shea. So I don't know how much of that $5.9 million we might need to use. I don't know if it needs to be replenished because I don't know if we need to use it yet.
Okay,
So I won't do that until we close out 2021.
Okay, I guess what I'm asking is that I know we had to dip into our reserves to get through two budget cycles. And I guess the bottom line is, where do we stand with that, our reserve now? And are we trying to get us back into a pre-2020 status with our reserve total funding?
So I never stopped doing what we're supposed to do with our general fund reserves. It's always stayed at 20% or above, knowing that we were in this situation. So we're, like I said, we have our 20% plus a little bit more that we could possibly use to balance this budget if we need to. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but we're not getting back to pre-2020 or anything like that, because we never dipped down below our 20% through this whole entire pandemic.
I hear, I understand what you're saying completely. I'm just trying to figure out, because, listen, to your credit, Amy, you kept us more than just afloat. You also been very good to make sure we hold our feet to the fire to protect that reserve fund. And I guess at the end of the day, it's this cumulative balance that grows every year by how much money we chunk into that fund. And I presume it's a healthy fund still. We haven't hit below the watermark where we need to be with where we are with that fund.
No.
And that's really the bottom line question. We're in pretty good shape with our reserve fund.
We are. I think in 2020, we were like just under like 19.9% for like a little bit, but then we've been fine ever since. So we're never going below 20%.
And that's just good stewardship on our part to make sure that that reserve fund is protected. It's there for our use, but it's also being protected at the same time. That's my concern.
But isn't that statutory?
It's our financial policy. And
Okay.
that's what, our rating agencies, because we're a coastal city, they like to see that for us,
Exactly, yeah.
that we have at least 20%.
Councilmember Jackson, did you have a question a minute ago?
No, it's fine. Thank you.
Okay. So, Amy, back to my point about how we really have more than 2.2 to make up for, because you say this is without restoring last year's cuts. So how much would that be?
Well, I'd have to go back, because I'd have to go back, Mayor, to see like what we recommended. So, well, I can't tell you the cuts. I can tell you for overtime, it's $1.7 million, but I'd have to get back and get you the number to the additional cuts that we made that people asked us to restore. I just can't remember the number off the top of my head.
So it's at least 1.7.
At least 1.7, yes.
Yeah, and likely it's 2.5 or 3, but it's significantly more than 2.2, in my opinion, just to get us to where we ought to be.
Right.
Yeah. All right.
I agree.
Well, before we leave this, one of the things you said, we accept this. Going back, I had a meeting, and I need to speak with you outside the confines of this meeting, Mr. Mayor. We had our executive committee meeting and finance committee meeting with the IM today, early this morning. And obviously they're going to be ramping up and opening up sometime late fall of 22. Right now they have something like 16, 18 employees. They're going to be going to like 40. So I just saw the projected 22 budget today. So I need to circle back on the appropriations for the IM.
All right.
So, okay. All right, we can go forward. Thanks.
Keith, shouldn't we do what we do similarly with the Gilliard, with the museum?
Well, I think that certainly would be appropriate, but I want to speak to the mayor and then obviously council on that, because it was pivotal, that agreement we had with the Gilliard during COVID. And anyway, I know we got a tight budget, but I think we need to revisit it. And right now, depending on, let's give you a few things. 32% of the budget is based on membership program, which is kind of like a hope and a wing. So obviously right now, I think the monies from government comprises, and this includes the county appropriation, 11% of the budget. That's what That includes the 250,000 from county council. So anyway, I'll circle with you, Mayor, and we certainly need to circle with county council as well on the operations side.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, man.
So the other option is to include a millage increase. Value of a mill is 1.7, so 2 mills would yield 3.4, 3 mills would yield 5.1. Our millage bank is currently 3.4, so we could go no higher than 3 mills, just to let you know that. A 2 mill increase would cover the $2.2 million deficit and some of the costs to restore overtime to the departments, but we would still need to utilize some general fund reserves in order to make up the difference, around probably $500,000. So I just want to talk about local option sales tax a little bit. So keep in mind that the credit provided by local option sales tax, the impact of millage increases on taxpayers decreases over time. It's of course dependent on the economy. And of course, if we have some type of weather event, because it's driven by consumer spending, obviously. So I have a slide that kind of shows what our net millage has been since 2009 to kind of show how local option sales tax affects net millage and what our citizens actually pay in taxes. You'll see in reassessment years that the net millage decreases, but you'll also see in other years after we've had millage increases, how it decreases over time too, because of the power of the local option sales tax credit. So I just wanted to kind of bring that to everybody's attention. And also noting that that's giving back 100% of local option sales tax. If we were to adjust that in any way, shape or form, then the impact that our taxpayers would see it would take a little bit longer for them to see that savings, if that makes sense. So this is our net millage history, 2009 to 2021. You can see we're actually a little bit less in 2021 than we were in 2009.
Wow.
Yes, our reassessment years, 2015, you see it dips down. 2020, it also dipped down. But you see, looking at 21, because local option sales tax has been so strong, we actually have gone down in our net millage. This is what our taxpayers pay in property taxes. Does that make sense to everyone? So I just wanted to point that out. Any questions?
Yes, it makes sense. And especially as the mayor was reading his property tax bill to us one more time last evening. I mean, yeah, if there's any way that we can resurrect the vote on the local option as a card to play in our deck, I think we need to do that.
But if you did that, Councilmember
I think you're reading
Jackson,
it.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Councilmember Waring.
No, go ahead. I don't want to cut across you. Got my point. I'll make my point after you. Thank you.
If you were to reduce any amount of the local option sales tax credit that we give back to our citizens, they're not going to see that much of a savings. So this is looking at 100% giving it back to them like we do right now. If we were to reduce that, then the impact to their savings would take a little bit longer over time.
Right, no, I appreciate that.
Councilmember Waring.
Yeah. Going back into time, property taxes in the St. Andrews Public Service District used to be far less than the city. And that's when they were in the water and sewer business. When local option sales tax came into being and the city gave the amount back to the taxpayers, it is the net millage that the taxpayer feels, not the gross millage that the taxpayer feels. I'm in favor of a millage increase. That money going back to reduce the tax bill, normally when we have done in the past, and I'm sure Amy can go through this, when we have had millages increase, it usually takes about 1.5 years or so, max 2 years, for the local option sales tax basically to refund that back to the taxpayers. So the net difference is lower than North Charleston, Mount Pleasant in most cases. It smooths the increase out. And I'm glad we're on YouTube, every citizen that's in the PSD right now pays higher property taxes than the city of Charleston resident because of this local option sales tax. They just don't know it. The PSD doesn't get lost revenue. They don't get local option sales tax revenue. So they can't offset the property taxes, and they deliver less services. When the PSD used to have lower taxes, they were in the water bit, they were in the sewer business. They're no longer in the sewage business. They couldn't afford to stay. They closed their plants, and CPW took them over. It is because of this net piece that if we continue to give the lost revenue back, listen, I'm in favor of a millage increase. I don't have any problem telling people that I raised the mills because we need to pay our staff. We need to pay our fire people. We need to pay the man driving that trash truck to come and pick up your trash. We need to pay our policemen. And if somebody wants to run against me because they said I raised taxes to do that, I'll stand my ground on that. But the lost revenue part where we give back and we can boldly say that our net millage rate is the lowest of a city of any size in the state of South Carolina, of our size, obviously we're the largest. That's a good statement to say. Most people in the PSD don't even realize it right now. For less services, they pay more in property taxes. They pay more in sewer bills. They pay more to get their water than if they were city residents. So I'm in favor, Mr. Mayor, of hiring that annexation officer to get that story out there, because that's a good story to be told.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Councilmember Shade?
Well, Councilman Waring, I think we should take what you just said and put it on a billboard and have a plane fly overhead around these annexations, because you're hitting the point right on the head, is that, you know, these unannexed areas, they don't understand how this taxing process works. And I'm glad you just reiterated that. Amy, go back one more slide for me, please. I'm trying to keep up with you, and just and walk through that with us just one more time. Because of our local option sales tax, that a taxpayer receives a benefit on their tax bill, our millage is lowered. The impact of our millage is lowered.
Right.
Am I saying that properly?
Yeah, so you can see, this is actually a better slide to show you. So our actual
Okay.
millage rate is 81.3.
Right.
But the net millage after the local option sales tax credit is really only 61.3 mils.
Okay, and when you have, and that's what I thought, and when you have those numbers, and you have a variable of 81.3 and a variable of 61.3 on a $300,000 home, what does that mean?
So I actually have slides on what it would cost.
You are a magician or a mind reader, Amy. I swear.
He's the mind reader.
He's got we're like one step behind you all the way on this meeting tonight.
Or she's just leading you in, brother.
I feel like I just swallowed a bait, you know. She's got a fishing pole in her hand.
So for Charleston County, 4% property, a 2 mil increase would be $40 and a 3 mil increase would be $60 in Charleston County. Same with Berkeley County, because it's $20 a mil, basically. Okay. And then 6% property, it's 60 or 90, depending on the mills. Same with, obviously.
Amy,
Yes.
how many
And then we-
property, yes, how many property tax increases have we had in the last 5-6 years?
Okay, so we had a property tax increase in 2013. We had one in 2016, and then we had one in 2019. Now, the 2013 was specifically for the SSRT team.
Right.
And also we bought, I think there was a fire engine that we bought with those funds. So those were specific to those costs. And then in 2019, it was 1.5 mils for general fund and 1.5 for public safety. And this was drainage. 2060 was when we increased drainage from 2 to 4 mils.
But look at the net
Yes.
mill increase. Look at the net mill. So go back to 13. Our gross was 82.3. The net was 63.1. And the year after the tax increase, our net millage was less
Mhm.
than the year of the tax increase. And what was the next tax increase from 13? Amy?
2016 is drainage. So
Okay.
that was specifically the 2 mills for drainage. So that did not touch the general fund at all. And then we
And that-
kind of stayed stagnant, but that was, it depends on consumer spending too. So we're not really sure what happened with those years, but it stayed kind of the same for those
look-
3 years.
Well, just look at it after 80, 16, 83.6, the net was 62.4, less than it was during the 13 increase. It was 63.1 in 13. That's an increase, came to 62. Had another tax increase. I mean, go back to 2009. From 2009, for an 11-year period, we are 2.3 mils higher over more than a decade.
Mhm.
Shit, I wish the federal government could do that.
Does
I mean,
that-
Councilmember Waring, continue your thought process. Over 11-year period, we're a 2.1 millage increase, and we are at a net millage increase of about zero difference.
That's my point. The laws,
0.1 negative.
Mhm.
Right. And real quick, Amy, I mean, the reason the loss was less last year was probably just due to COVID related sales tax revenue just being down a little bit, right?
Yes, but also we had reassessment year. And so you
Mhm.
trying to calculate the tax credit factor in a reassessment year were really super conservative.
Yeah.
So that could have been some of it as well, to where then it writes itself around in the next year after, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, this is bringing back memories of last year around this time in
That's right.
December. And I mean, the fact of the matter is 2 mil increase, 3 mil increase, when you're talking about 4% primary residents, it is a non-issue that people would not even understand. They would not even notice it unless people were demagoguing this issue politically to try to score points on the
Right.
4% issue. Now, on the 6% issue, there's a little bit more of an argument to be made, because even though it sounds like it's, just 2% on the assessment, when you really start getting up there in the 8-9 figure level of, major, well, not 9 figure, but 7 and 8 figure commercial property downtown, and you got tenants in there, there's a little bit of an argument to be made there, but still, it's not that much. It really just isn't. And I think that if we can there's no way we're messaging this to the public. I'm sorry. I mean, this is unbelievably complicated stuff.
Yeah.
However, and it's designed to be opaque, frankly. If there's a way that we can message the 2 to 3 mil increase with police, fire, public works, and just on a page, not a slideshow, a page. If we can find a way to message the fact that we're doing that millage increase so we can, support our law enforcement, we can support our fire, we can support our public works, not to take anything away from anybody else, but that's the bulk of our, employees, as we all know. I'm with Councilman Waring and anybody else that would stand behind this. It's the right thing to do. Our property taxes in this city are so low. They're criminally low for 4%. No offense. I mean, it is a net, loss when it comes to services and things like that on 4%. I think we can sell it. I really do. And it's not about selling it. It's the right thing to do. But it needs to be messaged appropriately. This is very complicated stuff to convey, because there's people on our council that are just going to scream tax increase as loud as they can, and they're going to try to scare people like they did last year. And it's just not the right way to do it. And I think we need to just be very cognizant of that as we move forward.
just to piggyback on what you said, there'll be people on our council that'll scream, but those people still want to pay our policemen. They want to pay our firemen. They want to pay our public works. You're not going to scream that I'm not going to vote for this because I do not want to pay firemen. I do not. So your messaging, you're spot on when you're saying that.
Well, like I have in the slide, 2 mills would cover the wouldn't even cover the overtime. Well, it would cover the 2.2 million deficit plus some, but not completely the overtime. We'd still have to throw in some general fund reserves to balance the budget.
Amy, what about making, I guess that would make the deficit higher. Because I definitely, if we're gonna do something like this, I definitely would like to make the raise for staff
Yeah,
quicker. I mean, if we're gonna do a tax increase, I think we need to take care of our staff now.
Okay, so that's
That
one.
was another 1.9 million.
Yeah,
I know, I saw it, but I'm just saying, if we're gonna do this, we need to make these folks whole.
But you need to do the 3 mills if you wanted to do that, because you got 2.2, you got the overtime, you got the other 1.9. So, I mean, you'd have to do the 3 mil increase.
Going back to
Right.
what Councilman Ross said, I just think that you get a bigger, if you market it properly, and you're talking about trying to make sure that our folks get $15 an hour, I think it's much more saleable.
so that, putting all of that in would be $5.8 million. So we'd still need to use some general fund reserves to balance.
Yeah, but you can use a little bit, right?
Yeah,
yeah, but Mr. Mayor, this is the financial plan right here. Okay. We do the 3 mil increase. And I know we said this last time on the meeting, that you and I need to make an appointment, sit down over there with our friends at CPW. They just need to pay us with the value of 1.96 million was 20 years ago today. That would take up another million in revenue, and you wouldn't even have to go to the 800,000 or so that Amy's talking about right here. I have no problems for a 3 mil increase to do what Councilman Appel said, to include what Councilmember Gregory has just said this now. We need to keep our people. We had private sector hire away some of our sanitation drivers several weeks ago. That's essential services. Now, anybody who wants to run for council and not pay for essential services, they're welcome to do it. Okay. Run out of the rail as soon as the trash can doesn't get picked up. So anyway.
Councilman, I ran right after we made a tax increase. And it wasn't a tax increase that affected my election, it was other things, but folks didn't really worry too much about it.
Councilmember Jackson?
I'm just volunteering to have my face on the billboard. 3 mills. with a duck right next to it.
Councilmember Shade?
No, I'm just taking in the humorous part of some of this stuff that Councilman Jackson just mentioned. And, you go back to that $40 increase on a 2 mil or 4%, that's half of a lunch one day. You spend $20 on lunch downtown Charleston easily.
Not enough for dinner.
And we did calculate this on a $500,000 house,
Yeah,
just because
right.
housing prices have gone a little bit.
That's a good move.
Yeah, I mean, you think about going, Mary and I went to the movies a couple of weeks ago for the first time in over a year. And trust me, the movie ticket, the popcorn and the beverage was much more than $40 for that one night out. Easy. I mean, it's a matter of perspective. It really is a matter of perspective. And no one likes it. Nobody likes to hear a property tax increase. They just don't like to hear that. But you've got to keep these things in perspective. And I think that slide of actual millage, net millage, really tells a good tale of what we're doing here and how this impacts you.
Okay, I'm just going to say this one time because I had my say last night, I know. And nobody's nobody knows about net millage and will ever take the time to figure all this out. Go back to that slide you just had with the 40 and the $60 with 3 mil increase. Remember my tax bill I showed you last night? It was a $58 savings over the prior year because of LOST. So, I mean, it's 6 of one, a half dozen of the other.
Yeah.
We'll all get accused of raising taxes no matter which way you go. But the more visible way is to raise the millage, because when your citizen gets a tax bill, he's going to see that it went from 81 to 84 and you raise the taxes rather than getting the bill for the same amount as he got last year. And we'll have captured the lost income without having a millage increase. Y'all make up y'all decide which way you want to go. It doesn't, 6 one, half dozen the other. I think it's easier. It's more comprehensible for our citizens to pay for it with the LOST, but I've already made that point and y'all didn't agree, so I get it.
Well, from a fiscal standpoint, I know Amy, millage is more dependable from a revenue standpoint from budgeting.
It is.
It is.
I get that. All right.
Councilmember Shade, did I answer your question?
Yes, ma'am, you
Okay.
did, and I think that, but to Councilmember Appel's point, when we get into the commercial building part of this, the non-4% assessment, that's where this thing comes on much higher. I mean, you're looking at this at a $500,000 figure. This building that I'm in right now, my tax bill on this thing is astronomical.
Tell me about it. Tell us about it. We know.
I know. I mean, so as you get into these high dollar buildings, it's a kick in the pants. It really is.
It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. And for the average homeowner, it goes back to my original point about what $40 may mean to the average citizen, but to the commercial person, to the business person, we just got to keep in mind it is a huge kick. And that's, here we are, we're trying to protect, and we, as we talked about last night, our King Street partners and how important all that is. And Councilmember Rappel's family was in the retail business. My family was in the retail business. This is the kind of stuff that really starts eating into your overall expenses when you start dealing with this sort of stuff. It's not huge, but it does make a difference. And we're trying to maintain momentum with those guys. So I'm saying that as a rambling, thinking out loud right now. We don't have to make any votes on this, obviously.
So Peter, let me ask you, what's the difference in what you would see on your tax bill on the commercial 6%, if adding 3 mils versus capturing the LOST?
It would have a different impact. I tried to go back and figure that out the other night, Mayor, and I thought I had those numbers pretty good. But when you take a 25% cut off of that lost money,
yeah.
It has on a 6%, it's a little bit higher than it would be on my personal residence. So that's a number I just got to go back and double check on. But when you get to the 6%, that 2% differential makes a huge difference on commercial properties. I mean, it's just that.
Do you want us to help you with that?
Yeah, ma'am.
Do you want us to help you with that calculation?
Yeah, I've had my bill here somewhere.
I'd be interested to know. I'd just be interested to know.
If you want to send it to me, we can look at it.
Yeah, I'll do that because I need to talk to you about that other item we talked about last night, Amy, anyhow. So I may need your help with. So
Okay.
Back to Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you. I do appreciate your wanting to make the distinction between the 6% and the 4%, Councilmember Shade, and Appel. I do, but I also think that when we're talking about taking a bite out of your retail income, if you're the property owner, which I realize a lot of the retailers are not, they're paying rent. And they are going to have to pay a pass through most likely to the property owners. However, their lease agreements are set up. But at the end of the day, the people who are owning commercial property as well as residential, but we're talking about commercial right now, their values have doubled in recent years. So it's a long game that commercial property owners play, and I do think that we need to take that into consideration. No investor in commercial property, whether it be rental property that they're renting out, residential rental property, are really thinking about the year over year. They're thinking about the long-term gain, and that's what we're giving them by keeping Charleston as well positioned as a services city, with all the accommodations use that we've just gone through this afternoon. So I do think that we just need to see the whole picture when we start talking about this.
All right. Ross?
Thanks, Mayor. Couple more points, and I'm just kind of warming up the muscles for our next council meeting in December. So a little bit of a dry run here, but in addition to what Carol was talking about, like, let's say you're somebody who's owned a piece of property on King Street or Broad Street for years and years and years, and you've been the beneficiary of what Councilwoman Jackson talked about, which is just unbelievable appreciation of real estate in the city, due in large measure to how we've run this city very well over the last several decades. Your assessments are capped on the 15% rule. So you're not even being taxed. You're not even starting with the real value of the property. It's this understated amount that's part of the Act 388 issue. And look, it's unfortunate that we have a 4%, 6% divide in this state, but that's a product, again, of the General Assembly. And it's frankly a very anti-business, anti-conservative framework. And there's a lot that's been written from very conservative groups and pro-business groups about how the state's tax infrastructure is just completely upside down, and it doesn't incentivize the right kind of things. That's why anytime a business of any kind of magnitude comes in, they got to do these fee in lieu deals and wheeling and dealing with the counties. That's a whole nother issue. So it's unfortunate that businesses are disproportionately impacted by some of this stuff. But at the end of the day, and I appreciate Amy running down some of those specifics so we can look and talk about tangible real life examples, because I think that's the best way to communicate these issues. At the end of the day, I still think my suspicion is that the property tax environment in the city is still very favorable for business. Downtown Columbia has had some real struggles with property taxes, and they've had, there's been a lot that's been studied and looked at over there that can draw a very direct line between their property tax environment and some struggles they've had in their downtown area. I don't get the sense anecdotally that anybody's tapping out downtown due to property taxes. Now, there's some other challenges about, out there, but I don't think it's not at that level yet where we're starting to really run too hot. We can run too hot for sure. I don't think we're there, and it would be helpful as we continue to move through this process that we sort of suss that out a little bit more, because it's a communications issue on this, and I think we're doing a good job of telling the story.
All right.
You said you think we are? I don't think we are telling the story. That's the problem.
I think we can always do a better job. We're doing okay. I think that these, like, for example, this slide up that's right, when you look at case studies and things like that, it's great stuff. We just have to find a way to message.
Make sure that a third grader can understand what we're talking about.
Absolutely. This is complicated stuff. And I think that if we give real life case examples, both at the 4% and the 6% rate, we talk about what the money is being used for, i.e. police, fire, public works, and the comments you made, Councilman Gregory, about, paying our other workers, making sure everybody's up at that fair amount. That's something I think a lot of people can get behind. And, I think the one thing we all have in common as council members, and certainly the mayor, is we got a lot of people that talk to us a lot about things they need, services they wish they were better. And this is what funding government looks like. And we have to have an honest conversation with the public about this. And I think if we do have that honest, clear conversation with people, they'll understand. And we just have to, do that. And I think it's the right thing to do. And at the end of the day, we're here to do the right thing. And that gets to Councilman Waring's point about, looking his folks and his constituents in the eye and saying that. And I think that's what we got to be doing.
All right. I'm getting you primed up.
So
All right.
moving on, just some dates, key dates. We have to have the draft budget to council on November 23rd. Advertisement to the paper with the millage rate, and the total budget has to be the paper on Wednesday, November 17th. So it's in the newspaper on that Sunday before the 23rd. So council workshops on Tuesday, November 16th. And that's when we want to present the draft budget to them, because we would want to make sure that we have consensus with the budget before we send it to the paper for advertising, because we get in this pickle every single year. So I'm trying to avoid that if we can. So then the next question would be, which budget are we presenting? And if we're going to just the budget as is with the 2.2 million general fund covering the difference, or are we doing a millage increase, how many mills, and et cetera. So what I'm hearing is that we want to do a millage increase, correct? In the budget that we present on Tuesday
Correct.
at 3 mills.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. So the mayor gave us a list earlier of things to add back depending on the millage that we might move forward with. But if we're going to talk about doing the pay plan full year, that kind of wipes out any additional things that we might want to add. So it would just be those three things. So over time, the $2.2 million deficit, and then doing the pay plan for the full year. So I just want to make sure that's where we're headed.
We're in the same place.
Okay. Are you you're telling me that that's where we're headed? Yes.
Yes, that's
Yes.
my vote.
Anybody else? I don't see any of the heads nodding or shaking their heads. Y'all are advising me, remember?
I missed out on part of that. What did Councilman Gray? Could you say that again? What did you say?
3% met 3 mills.
Right.
And
I'll vote for that.
and make sure that, we include the $15 minimum wage now for all employees.
Well, it's 14 now.
Yeah.
It's adding $1. We're at 13 right now. So what the extra 1.9 would get us to just putting an extra $1 on it January 1 versus 50 and 50. We still don't get to 15 until the 2 subsequent years, unless we do another $1 in 2023.
Well, that's what I thought we were going to do. I'm ready to give them their $15 now.
Yeah, that would be even another.
That would be
Probably like
13.
4 or 5 million more.
It's another 6 or 7 there. So it would be, yeah. It would be.
I mean, I hear you, Dudley. That puts us past our millage cap.
I'm following you. I'm following you now.
Yeah.
Okay.
The only one caveat I would add to the 3 mills, Mr. Mayor, I said it earlier, but we really need to go back over to CWS and just knock down that other slightly more than $1 million.
I'm happy to ask for it, and
No,
that would be that much less coming out of our reserve.
that's right. We may not even have to go to our reserves. It's just not right. $1,096,000 in 1996 paid for a lot more than $1,096,000 does in 2020, 22. So,
I agree.
okay. Well,
We'll talk offline on how to approach that.
yes, sir. Okay.
All right.
But yeah, I'm ready to vote for that. I'm telling you.
Gotcha. All right. Any other advice?
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll hope to see most of y'all at 5:30 for our revitalization commission meeting. Don't forget.
Yeah, I'm going to try to get home and take that one from home.
All right. I'm gonna sign off. I gotta make some return phone calls.
I want to
Thank
thank Amy for making it a lot better this year. I mean, it was tough last year for all of us. It was grueling, frankly.
Good job, Amy.
Great job. Great job.
Oh, yeah. Terrific.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank my staff. My staff is the best.
Well, thank
so.
them too.
Yes, they are.
Tell them they've earned a turbo cone. Come with
Yeah.
that.
That's why we gotta pay to keep them.
That's right.
Yeah, that would
Bye, all.
help. That's for sure.